I shouldn't remember it this clearly, but I do. The way she leaned against the doorframe that afternoon, sunlight cutting across her shoulder, her hand brushing the edge of her blouse like she was trying to make it sit just right. That was the first time I heard her say it. "Don't call me Mrs. Reyes anymore," she said, almost playful. "You should call me by my first name." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. That sounds dangerous. And it did. I was there to fix the shelf her son had broken. A stupid errand, really, tightening screws, replacing the wood that split down the middle. The kind of thing you do when you're the younger friend, the one people call because you're tall enough to reach things and young enough not to complain. The house was too quiet when I arrived. No TV on, no sound of her husband anywhere. Just the tick of a wall clock, too loud for the room. She led me into the living room, her steps careful on the wooden floor. She moved like someone used to being looked at but never asking for it. I noticed her hands first. Rings that weren't new, nails that weren't painted. She folded them together when she spoke to me, like she didn't trust them to rest naturally at her sides. "So, you still good with this kind of stuff?" she asked, pointing to the shelf. "Yeah," I said, setting down my bag. "Shouldn't take long." She lingered, not hovering exactly, but not leaving either. I could feel her eyes on me as I worked, the way people watch a fire burn in the fireplace. Drawn in, quiet, unable to look away even when nothing's really happening. I tightened the screws, replaced the cracked panel, wiped the dust with the back of my hand. My shirt stuck a little to my back. It was warmer than I expected. Or maybe it was the way she stood a little too close, pretending to check if the shelf was even. Her perfume was faint, not sweet, something older, sharper. It stayed in the air between us. "You always help out like this?" she asked. "Only when I can't make excuses fast enough," I joked. She smiled. Small, quick, but it lingered in her eyes longer than on her mouth. I should have focused on the screws, but my hand slowed. There was something in the way she tilted her head when I answered, like she was listening for something more than what I said. When I finished, I stood, brushing sawdust from my jeans. "All set." She stepped closer to check, but instead of looking at the shelf, her gaze stayed on me. "You've grown up," she said softly, almost as if she was surprised by her own words. I didn't know what to do with that. I laughed again too quickly. "Guess it happens." She turned then, maybe to hide the look on her face, or maybe just to keep me guessing. "Tea?" she asked from the kitchen doorway, her hand resting on the frame. "Sure." That's when she said it. "Don't call me Mrs. Reyes anymore. You should call me by my first name." I froze with the empty glass still in my hand. "That sounds dangerous," I said before I could stop myself. Her smile was slow this time, deliberate. "Maybe it is." And then, she reached out, brushed a bit of sawdust from my shoulder. Not hurried, not careful. Just enough for her fingers to linger longer than they should have. The glass slipped slightly in my grip. And in that silence, I realized, this wasn't just a repair job anymore. Dangerous. That word didn't leave me, even as I followed her into the kitchen. Her house smelled faintly of lemon soap, the kind that clings to old wooden cabinets and never really fades. She moved with quiet precision, pulling 2 cups down, filling the kettle, tapping the counter with her fingers while it boiled. I watched her do these simple things like they meant something. I shouldn't have. She wasn't just someone's mom. She was his mom, my friend's. The one who lent me money when I needed it, who fed us when we stayed too late playing games in her living room. She wasn't supposed to be standing here now with her hair a little loose from its clip, laughing softly when the kettle squealed. "Milk? Sugar?" she asked. "Black's fine." She raised a brow. "When did you grow up into someone who drinks tea like that?" I shrugged, pretending it wasn't because of her. "Guess it happens." Her smile faltered then, just slightly. "Not always." There was weight in that, something tired in the way she said it. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't just being playful. She meant it. Not everyone grows up. Not everyone changes. Maybe she was thinking about herself. She handed me the mug, and I noticed the faint tremor in her fingers. Small, almost invisible, but it made my chest tighten. She wasn't untouchable. She wasn't the untouchable mother I used to know. She was human, carrying something heavy I didn't understand yet. We sat across from each other at the table. The clock ticked again, too loud. She tapped her nail against her cup. "You ever feel like you miss something?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Like what?" "Like you walked through years of your life, busy, doing the right things, and then you look back and wonder if you skipped the parts that matter." Her eyes stayed fixed on the steam rising from her tea, not on me, which made it worse. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Yeah, I know what you mean." I didn't. Not really. I was too young to understand losing whole decades. But I knew enough to hear the loneliness tucked into her voice, the kind of loneliness you don't admit to people who can't carry it. I wanted to say something else, something that would pull her out of that silence. But I didn't trust myself. Instead, I stared at her hands again. They rested around the mug now, still and careful, like she needed the warmth to stay grounded. That's when she looked at me, really looked, and it felt like she saw through every casual word I tried to hide behind. The air between us thickened. I couldn't move, couldn't joke my way out of it. Her voice was quieter this time, almost a whisper. "Don't go yet. Stay a little longer." Her fingers brushed my arm as she said it, light as a thread, but enough to anchor me in place. I should have stood up. I should have said no. But instead, the words burned at the edge of my mouth. Reckless, unsteady. "You don't want me to leave, do you?" Her silence was an answer I wasn't ready for. I stayed. Of course I did. The tea cooled between us, untouched, while I tried to find safe ground in the conversation. But every time she leaned her chin against her palm, every time her sleeve slipped back and showed her wrist, the ground shifted again. "You should be out with people your age," she said suddenly, breaking whatever quiet spell hung in the kitchen. "Not here wasting a Saturday with me." Her words were sharp, but her eyes softened the edges. "I don't mind," I said, too quick, too honest. She tilted her head, studying me like I just told her a secret I wasn't supposed to. Then she laughed, quiet, almost to herself. "God, listen to me. I sound like I don't even know." Forget I said that. But I couldn't forget. Not when her laugh faltered halfway, like it wasn't meant to come out. Not when her hand, resting on the table, was just close enough that if I shifted mine, our fingers would touch. I told myself not to. I gripped the mug instead, even though it was cold now. The silence stretched, longer than it should have. And then the sharp buzz of her phone on the counter. The sound startled us both. She reached for it, glanced at the screen. Her lips tightened. She didn't answer, just flipped it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully. "It's fine," she said. Too fast. Her hand lingered on the phone, as if she wanted to say more, then pulled away. I didn't push. I just watched the way she avoided my eyes, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear twice though it didn't need it. That vulnerability was louder than anything she might have admitted. I leaned back, trying to give her space, but my chest ached with the weight of it. I wanted to know. I wanted to understand what she wasn't saying. "You don't have to talk about it," I murmured. Her gaze snapped back to mine then. A long beat passed. Too long. And that's when it happened. Her hand brushed mine. Not deliberately, not planned. Just the lightest touch, but she didn't pull away immediately. The air shifted. My pulse raced so hard I thought she might hear it. "I shouldn't," she whispered, almost to herself, withdrawing slowly, fingers curling against her palm. Neither of us moved after that. The clock ticked louder, the house felt smaller, and the space between us, barely a few inches, felt like a canyon I couldn't cross without losing myself. I tried to pull back, tried to steady my breathing, to think of something ordinary to say, but my voice caught before it formed. And then, as if the universe wanted to test us further, there was a knock at the door. A sharp, uninvited sound that jolted us both upright. She pressed her hand against her chest, eyes wide. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked. She shook her head. No words this time. The knock came again, firmer. And in that suspended moment, her fear, my longing, the closed door between us. I knew one thing for certain. We were standing on the edge of something we couldn't undo. The knock at the door eventually faded, leaving only the echo of it in the air. She never answered. Neither of us spoke until the quiet pressed too heavy to ignore. She stood near the doorway, arms folded, her back to me. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she tilted her head slightly like she was listening for the person outside. Yet her feet never moved. Finally, she exhaled. "Sometimes I think I'm afraid of opening doors." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She turned then, and something in her face was stripped bare. No playful smile, no careful distance. Just the kind of tired truth people usually hide. "People expect me to be put together," she said, voice low. "The reliable one, the safe one. But lately," she trailed off, biting her lip before finishing. "Lately I feel like I don't know who that even is anymore." Her words sat between us, raw and unguarded. I swallowed, unsure if I had the right to step into that space. But I couldn't stop myself. "You don't always have to be that," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. "With me, you don't." She stared at me then, hard, searching. Her arms loosened, falling slowly to her sides. "That's dangerous," she whispered. I almost laughed because it was the same word I'd used hours ago. But my chest was too tight to let it out. I rose from my chair before I realized I was moving. She didn't back away, didn't turn. I stopped a step too close, close enough to see the faint line at the corner of her mouth, the quick rise and fall of her breath. "I shouldn't," I began, but the words tangled. Her eyes flicked to my mouth before darting back up. Just for a second. Enough to undo me. "Say it," she pressed softly. My throat burned. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hand lifted halfway, hovered like she might touch me, then curled into a fist at her chest. The silence after felt louder than the knock on the door had. Every second stretched, suspended, pulling us closer and holding us apart all at once. "You don't know what you're doing," she said finally. But it wasn't sharp. It was trembling, uncertain. "Maybe not," I admitted. My pulse was in my ears. "But neither do you." That landed. She flinched slightly, not from anger, but recognition. She knew I was right. We stood there, locked in a stare that refused to break. I could taste the words unsaid between us, the gravity dragging us toward something neither of us could take back. Her lips moved then, barely a whisper. "What are you going to do now?" And with that question, the room turned into a storm, the air too heavy to breathe, both of us teetering on the edge of a choice that would change everything. Her question hung in the air, "What are you going to do now?" And I didn't answer. Couldn't. My pulse was too loud in my ears. But the silence didn't last. Her phone buzzed again on the counter, rattling against the wood. This time she didn't ignore it. She snatched it up, thumb swiping hard across the screen. Her voice sharpened. "I told you not to call me today." I froze. She wasn't speaking to me. Her back was turned, her words low and clipped, but every syllable carried heat. "I said it's not a good time," she hissed. Then quieter. "No, not him. He doesn't matter." That last part hit harder than it should have. She ended the call with a sharp press of her thumb and set the phone down with too much force. When she turned back to me, her expression had shifted, caught between apology and something fiercer. I wanted to ask, "Who was that?" But the words stuck. My chest already knew the answer. "It was my husband," she said finally, flat and unblinking. "He thinks I'm distracted lately." Her gaze locked onto mine as if daring me to flinch. Distracted. That word pressed like a weight against my ribs. She wasn't talking about broken shelves anymore. She was talking about us. I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" My voice cracked. "Like you see me," she whispered. And that, more than the phone call, was the twist. Because she wasn't afraid of her husband, or the knock at the door, or the line we kept almost crossing. She was afraid of me seeing her too clearly, of me knowing what she wanted when she couldn't admit it out loud. You think this is some fantasy, she continued, softer now, shaking her head. But you don't know what it's like to wake up next to someone who doesn't ask anymore. To go years without hearing your name spoken like it means something. Her words unraveled me. My hands clenched at my sides, because all I wanted was to say her name right then, to give it back to her like a promise. Instead, I whispered, "Then let me." Her breath caught. She stared at me, stunned. And for a moment I thought she might let me, that the space between us would finally collapse. But then another knock at the door, louder this time, followed by a familiar voice calling out, "Mom? You home?" I froze. Blood drained from my face. It was my friend. Her eyes went wide. She pressed a finger to her lips, silent, urgent. The tension twisted sharp inside me. Guilt, desire, fear. Everything colliding in one impossible heartbeat. And in that fragile stillness, I realized the truth. The danger wasn't just what I felt for her. The danger was that someone else might finally see it, too. The sound of his voice, her son's voice, sent everything crashing back into place. We didn't move at first, just stared at each other, both frozen. Hearts pounding in a silence so loud it drowned out the words coming from the hallway. "Mom? You here?" She pressed her palm flat against the table, steadying herself. Then she mouthed one word at me, "Go." My body resisted. My chest screamed at me to stay, to say something, to not leave things shattered like this. But my feet carried me anyway, slipping down the back hallway, quiet, quick, my pulse racing in my ears. I waited in the narrow shadow of the back door until I heard her voice again, calm, steady, as if nothing had just happened. In here, I was just making tea. Her son's laugh, his footsteps, the scrape of a chair. I left. That should have been the end. But it wasn't, because later that night, long after the street outside had gone quiet, my phone buzzed. A message, just one line. "We need to talk." I didn't think. I went back. The house looked different in the dark. Lights low, the living room dim except for the glow of a single lamp. She stood near the window, arms crossed, not looking at me when I walked in. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, but her voice cracked halfway. "You asked me to." That broke something in her. She turned, and I saw the tears she'd been holding back all day. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know. We can't." "I know," I said again, but my voice rose. "But I can't stop." Her breath shook. She pressed her fingers to her lips like she could hold the words in. But they slipped out anyway. "You make me feel alive again. Do you understand that?" The confession hit harder than anything else. I stepped closer, close enough to see her trembling, to feel the storm between us. "I don't want to ruin anything for you," I said, voice low, raw. "But if you tell me to walk away, I will. Just don't lie. Don't tell me you don't feel it too." Her hands dropped from her face. For a long moment, she just looked at me, like she was measuring whether to destroy us or save us. Finally, she whispered, "I do." The room seemed to exhale with her. Every wall, every clock tick, every hidden thought fell silent. We didn't kiss. We didn't rush. We just stood there, forehead to forehead, sharing the same unsteady breath. It was more intimate than anything else could have been. "I don't know what happens next," she murmured. "Neither do I admitted. "But I'm not walking away." Her hand found mine then, fingers interlacing slowly, deliberately, as if sealing a promise. And in that quiet, I knew whatever line we had crossed, there was no going back. We didn't sleep that night, not because anything happened, but because neither of us dared to. We just sat there in the dim glow of her living room lamp, hands still joined, words spilling in fragments and silences. She told me about her marriage, how it had thinned into something polite and hollow, how she felt invisible in her own house. She confessed she wasn't angry at her husband anymore, just numb. That numbness scared her more than rage ever could. And I told her about myself, how I'd always carried this gnawing sense of being on the outside, even with my friends, How the moment she looked at me that way, like I mattered, it felt like stepping into the light for the first time. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no perfect declarations. Just two people, stripped raw, clinging to the truth they couldn't ignore anymore. By the time dawn bled through the curtains, everything had changed. Her son would wake soon. Her husband would call again. The world would come crashing in. But between us, there was no more pretending. She turned to me, eyes red from sleeplessness. "This doesn't end well, you know?" "Maybe not," I said. "But it doesn't mean it shouldn't begin." Her smile then was small, tired, but real. The kind of smile you don't fake when you've been running from yourself for years. We didn't map out the future. We didn't talk about secrets or risks. We just agreed, quietly without fanfare, that we would see each other again. Not as Mrs. Reyes and her son's friend, but as two people who, for better or worse, found something they weren't ready to give up. When I left that morning, the street was wet from a night rain. My shoes soaked through on the walk home, but I didn't care. The world felt sharper, more alive. I kept replaying the night. Her words, her tears, the way her fingers tightened around mine like she was afraid I'd disappear. And beneath it all, one truth settled into me. Sometimes what makes life dangerous is exactly what makes it worth living. Sparkle's reflection/moral life doesn't give us neat paths. Sometimes we stumble into moments we're not supposed to, moments that scare us because they're too real. But love, if that's what you call it, has a way of breaking rules and finding light in impossible places. For her, it meant being seen again. For me, it meant finally belonging. For both of us, it meant a choice we couldn't undo. And maybe that's enough.